So you see my last video. Now you know how to practice hard stuff. Now you know how to play runs and practice slow with a metronome. What about jumps and chords? And how do you get that up to the final tempo? And of course, the biggest question of all, how do I play Animen's Unravel? Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back to WattKeys. And today we're going to be doing part 2 of this 2-part series, how to practice and learn difficult material. I'm going to be answering all those questions and more, except for maybe the last one because it's Animen's Unravel, come on. So yeah, if you haven't seen my last video yet, covering the general approach and strategies and how to do runs, you should click up there and watch that first. Or if you're just struggling with jumps, then I guess keep watching this, maybe. But whatever the case may be, let's stop wasting time and let's get it. All right, let's talk about jumps. Practicing strat number 1, shadow jumps. So I call these shadow jumps, right? Because you're jumping and landing on the note as fast as you can, but not playing until you land on the note, feel the keys, and then pressing in with articulation. And these are for jumps as well as for chords. You can practice chords this way too. So the passage we're using today is in the coda. It's measure 228. So it goes like, clearly my left hand's not clean, so we're gonna practice using this. So what I'm going to do, play the first note, B, and then as soon as I finish playing this note, as fast as I can, jump to the next chord. So I've landed on this D diminished chord, first inversion. So I've played the B, and now I've jumped as fast as I can to the next one, and I'm not playing it yet, but now that I've found it, then press in, right? And then next. So on and so forth. So the real point here, right, is to get the feeling, the right feeling of what the jump is, right? Because you could jump like this and practice this way, but you're not really drilling into your head and into your fingers what the proper feel should be, right? Like what the articulate feel should be. And instead you're getting only like a half sort of touch of what the key is, right? Because it's like a 50-50 whether or not you land right, and practice doesn't necessarily make perfect, right? Perfect practice makes perfect. But I mean, there are issues with that statement as well, but that's kind of like the idea behind this, right? So shadow jumps, probably the best way to practice these sorts of jumps. I do this for like everything across the keyboard, right? Did this for Animen's. You can do this for Animen's Unravel with those jumps. So definitely practice your shadow jumps. Strat number 2, which I do significantly less than shadow jumps, so I only use this when I feel like I'm really off, is to practice with your eyes closed. Now this sounds kind of weird, but essentially what we're doing here is testing muscle memory and developing that feel entirely, so we're not reliant at all on our eyes and our vision. When you're playing fast, right, you don't have time to think about where you're going, right? You're entirely reliant on what you've practiced, your muscle memory, etc., etc. So I'll practice my eyes closed after I've done the shadow jumps, after I've gotten a certain amount of feel for where the notes are. So this really helps hone in that muscle memory and to tell me where I need to practice more to get that to sink in a little bit deeper. Now, you're obviously going to make some mistakes with this, but it's a nice test of where you're failing that you might not be able to see otherwise. Here we go. There's the first one. So this jump, it's not that clean. So we practice this a whole bunch. Now we try again. But you get the point. So practicing with your eyes closed, give it a shot. Now let's talk about bringing it up to speed, bringing it up to performance tempo. Tip number 3 is what I call laddering up on the metronome. Basically what you're gonna do, take your metronome, start on your slow tempo, and then each time you are able to complete the tempo, then you jump up a certain number of metronome marks, and then you do it again. So you could choose however big or however small you want the jump to be. I would recommend when you're first like scaling up the tempo, keep the jumps really small. Once it's comfortable and you're just like practicing slow for maintenance, you can make the jumps bigger. So for demonstration, we're going to do this part of the coda. And I'm gonna start at my slow tempo of 100. I've done it. I'm gonna jump 10 because I'm relatively comfortable with this piece. Jump another 10 until I get all the way up to my final performance tempo. And then I'll climb back down either in the same increments or in bigger increments because you're climbing down. And at times you can vacillate between high tempos and low tempos, especially as you start getting up there and you feel like you're losing your touch. Then you want to jump back down, regain composure, regain that feeling in your fingers, and then climb back up or jump back up. Number of times you should repeat before you move on to the next depends on what your goals are, right? If you are casually playing this, then one time might be more than enough, right? Especially if you're bringing it back in a maintenance sort of way. But if you're a pro and you're really drilling this in for the first time, then maybe you want to do 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times, right? Or you straddle a fence somewhere in between. If you're intermediate, then you do 3 times. So that's how you bring it up to final tempo, or that's what I do to bring stuff up to final tempo and begin pushing tempo as well. I'm practicing tempo. That's how I get the last few metronome marks that I'm looking for. And of course, on the topic of the last few clicks that I'm looking for, tip number 4 is to be cognizant of your body movements, your finger movements, and to keep them as small and efficient as possible. The only way you're going to play fast is if you're not wasting energy doing like big motions and wasting time doing big motions essentially. And that's part of the reason why we practice shadow jumps, right? The shadow jump is as fast as you can in the most linear fashion possible, right? You're not jumping like this, you're going as fast as you can. And that helps cut down on unnecessary movement. Is your body moving in the right place to help with the arpeggio? Are your fingers coming up too high when it's not called for? Are they keep staying close to the keyboard? Paying attention to all these things will help bring your tempo up by those last few clicks if you haven't paid attention to them already. And that brings us to tip number 5, which is to begin paying attention to phrasing when you're bringing up the tempo. So phrasing helps direct where you need to think, which we're going to talk about later, and helps direct articulation and movement. Once you start getting your phrasing down, then stuff really starts to pick up because then you'll know which parts you can play lighter at and which parts you need to play heavier at. So for example, we're going to start with this same section, start adding in some of the accents that are written and a bit of pedal. So obviously I can't go into a full discourse about how to phrase now, but it's important to start thinking about. First get the notes and the articulation, then get the phrasing. Both are super important. 6th tip for bringing up the tempo is for parts where both hands are very difficult or equally hard or whatever, you want to focus on one hand over the other. What do I mean by that? Basically, you want to pick one hand to commit entirely to muscle memory. So you really grind that hand out so you don't need to think about it anymore other than pay like some slight attention to it. And then put all your focus and energy into the other hand when you're practicing. So we're going back to the section that we played last time. And I'm going to drill my right hand until I don't need to think about it anymore because that's what makes sense to me here. It's just like runs, right? And then my left hand is what I'm going to put all my focus into when I'm practicing and playing. So right now, I'm only looking at the notes that my left hand is playing. And my right hand is just doing its thing. I'm paying attention to make sure that it's still even and it's phrased in the right way, but I'm not putting as much focus into it as I am my left hand. So willpower and brain power management is pretty important, especially when things are hard in both hands. This brings us to our last section on how to learn hard stuff, which is putting everything together into the performance. And tip number 7 is to focus on the melody in the hard sections. This kind of touches back on brain power management because playing at high speeds is impossible to think about each and every single note you're playing. At that point, you just have to trust your muscle memory. But playing without control is also out of the question because then you just mess up and you derail and things get really messy. So assuming that at this point you have put in the work, the slow practice, you've implemented all the strategies and everything is solid at a medium tempo when you're practicing and pretty fine at a high tempo too. What you want to do now is only think about the melody when you get to those parts. You want to phrase the melody right. You want to make sure the melody comes out correctly because that's what everything else is working in service of anyways. If you have done the practice, if you've done everything right, then the fingers will move, the fingers are going to produce the results that you're looking for, and it just works. This is now talking about performance mentality and stuff like that. You have to trust your practice. If you can't trust your practice, then go practice more. That's the moral of the story. So we're going to use this section again, and I'm only thinking about because I want to hear the da-dum, ba-dum, right? So. And there I'm thinking about the quarters, right? So that wasn't perfect, but you get the idea. I'm focusing on the general phrasing and the curvature of the phrasing and the specific notes that I want to phrase and articulate clearly. And that helps me get through this section, and I trust my fingers to do the rest. Which brings me to point number 8, which is trust your muscle memory. Trust your fingers, trust in your practice. I'm going to reiterate what I just said. If you can't trust your practice, then go practice more. If you can point to your past practice and say, I can do this, then you're in a good spot, and just trust yourself. Trust in your practice. Trust that your fingers will do it. Pay attention to the melody. Pay attention to the important things, which brings us to point number 9, right? You can't completely shut off your brain, but have railroad markers and other spots which are important in the piece where you switch your brain back on to consciously analyze and say, this is what I need to do next. These are the parts that I need to emphasize and phrase out next, before you shut that off and slip back into full trust mode, and all muscle memory mode, and listening mode. Essentially, you're listening to yourself play. But how to perform is a very large topic that I'll cover another time. But suffice it to say, trust your muscle memory. Have spots where you come back to consciousness to remember, okay, this is what I have to do here in order to hit it technically. This is the fingering that I need to hit. I need to hit this 4 on this note, or else everything's gonna fall apart. Have those things, have those points, be conscious, hit them, and then start listening to yourself again. Let your mind go back to that place where you're involved with the music, where you're deeply involved with the music in a way that's not as technical, or maybe not technical at all. This is how you bring these hard parts up to speed and then go out and perform them. Alright, and that about wraps it up for this video. Thanks for tuning into this mini series on how to practice and learn hard material. I hope that it was really helpful and beneficial for you. And if it was, well, now you have all the tools needed to play Anime's Unravel. Remember to keep practicing and practice safely, right? If your hands begin to feel very tired, if your fingers and stuff start to hurt, you should stop. You might not be ready to play certain pieces yet. These are all just techniques and skills and tactics that you can apply to something that's within your grasp. We're not talking about picking up new techniques here, right? We're building strength to be able to move on to the next ones. Make sure that you stick somewhat within your level, right? That you're not overreaching so that you don't end up hurting yourself, because that's worse than anything. A lot of the times, poor technique is what's holding you back more than anything else. But that's a video for another time. As usual, if you have questions, comments, concerns, whatever about anything that I said in this video, please comment those down below and I'll try to answer them. If you have any tips or tricks of your own, please let us all know so we can all learn and grow together. Be sure to share this video with people who you think could benefit from hearing some of this information. And let me know what you want to hear me talk about next, because there's any number of things that I could discuss about playing the piano, and I really want your input on what you want me to talk about. That being said, this video, as usual, is brought to you by my music production company, Just Be Records. If you need help with mixing and mastering, please feel free to click the link in the description down below and let me know. Please like, comment, and subscribe, especially if this video series has helped you out. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, be sure to click here. You want to see more general analyses of performances and pieces, click here. Until next time, peace.